Okay, Gamescom 2024. John and I were at the show this year, and first thing we did actually on the Wednesday morning was to head straight to the Xbox booth because they were pretty much the only major player in terms of the console sort of platform holders that actually had a presence, and there was a bunch of games there. And I was surprised and delighted to see that Stalker 2 was there, had its own little booth. Any game that's got any kind of aspect of violence to it is kind of locked up in a black room. So you have to queue.
Thank you, Deutschland.
So you have to queue up and go in. And again, we were really surprised and delighted to see that both the PC version and the Xbox version were in attendance. Now, Alex, you saw the game last year, and we were kind of, how could we say it? We were concerned, I think.
Yeah, and essentially, I mean, Phil was also talking about when we met him, but they were just like trying to string up a build and get it up and running for last year's Gamescom show, and the rough edges were very apparent. Issues were very apparent. Here, with multiple delays under the belt at this moment, as well as all that development time that means, the game's now coming out in November. What you saw, at least what you're reporting to me, seems like it's living up to the Stalker name and also a way more polished experience than what you saw last year.
Yeah, let's go into detail on that because it is important. I'm just going to say what I saw. Went into the booth, went straight to the Xbox. It definitely was an Xbox running the game. The XTK was there. It was powered on. Heat was coming out. This wasn't any shenanigans of fake consoles with with PCs behind the scenes. It was definitely
the good old days.
Yes, the good old days, the classic 2012, 2013 era. But no, it was the Xbox build. And the first impression that I had was, wow, image quality on this is really, really good. It was just a title screen, right? But it was, a real-time 3D scene. It's like, image quality on this is really good. So before I actually dipped into the game, I went into the graphics, the display menu rather, to see what graphics modes there are. No graphics modes. Interesting. Started the game and essentially it's running with an unlocked frame rate at the moment, and but the image quality is really, really good. Now, I think we could all agree that Unreal Engine 5 titles have kind of suffered image quality wise because of super aggressive upscaling, but this was looking really, really clean. So I'm kind of curious to know what resolution it was running at. You can never tell at a show floor, but it looked really good. Performance, the cutscene that it started with was kind of highly variable, but once you're into gameplay, it was 60 and thereabouts, I would say. So, bearing in mind there's still development work to go, it was actually really, really pleasant to see that. And the whole experience was much more polished than it was when we saw it last year, Alex. So what can I say? I'm quite excited about this now. The build that I played wasn't perfect, far from it. I mean, you'd expect that, right? A couple of things that sprung to mind. I noticed John was on the station next to me, and I noticed him dipping into the settings menu to change the controller sensitivity. It was way, way, way too high. He had it on the absolute lowest. And it was still really, really, really sensitive. And the loading times when you die were very, very long, intrusively so. That was a bit of an issue. Thing is, though, this is an entirely different conversation to what we were having last year, where it was like, wow, this is, we've got concerns about this. When's it coming out? How much time have they got to polish it? Seemed like there was foundational work to be done to get the game into shape. Now I'm talking about controller sensitivity and loading times, which is basically, a vastly improved situation. I don't know if you saw any of the additional assets that have been released, but Alex, how do you think this is shaping up based on what you have seen?
Well, what I've seen is that it actually does. So I was originally a little bit scared when they showed off the initial trailer of the game. I thought it looked graphically really great, but I was afraid that it would lose a lot of the free form aspects of Stalker to be, like a more polished current generation experience. Like there's vast worlds of difference in terms of like what Stalker is in terms of the original Stalker's polish versus its freedom versus, for example, like a AAA game these days. They're very different. And I was afraid it would lose that, but all the footage I've seen so far actually seems to be very open-ended, a lot of you tackle it the way you want kind of thing, as well as the interactions between the various groups in the game, both mutants and human factions. So I was actually very interested to see that. On a technical level, the footage has been making it hard. I'm always curious about hardware lumen versus not hardware lumen. The footage has been super great for that, for me to really ascertain that in a great way. Another thing that I'm very curious about is a lot of the footage has had, you can tell me if the Xbox build is this way, no motion blur? Is this true?
I don't know. You might be right there.
And so I think I'm always curious about those things. Those are probably settings that'll exist on PC, but they've been demoing the game with little to no motion blur, which I found interesting because usually UE they but per default they always have
it's
that.
It's
there. And I'll this is presumably going to be later UE, and based upon our recent interactions with like FSR2 and stuff, I'm very curious if they'd use TSR on console, which could be one of the reasons why it looks so good, because later versions of TSR, we really haven't seen it. A lot of the games that have been using later Unreal have been using FSR. So TSR is better, just is in Unreal at least. So if they're using that on console, that could be one of the explanatory factors of why you thought it looked pretty sharp.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the other takeaway for me is that it is definitely a Stalker game, right? That's it's even down to the little janky stuff that you would kind of come to expect. It's there. So yeah, if you love that game, if you love that atmosphere, if you love that vibe, I think it's really shaping up very, very nicely. And this was actually the game that John and I, it was our Beeline game. We had to see that one first. We actually queued for like 3/4 of an hour to see it.
Oh my.
Yeah, but we really wanted to see it, and we stuck around, especially when we heard that they've got both the PC and the Xbox builds in that little booth of theirs. So yeah, it's looking good. Oliver, have you taken a look at any of the new footage?
Yeah, I have, and I've obviously heard your impressions and John's impressions. I'm glad to hear about the image quality that does, to me, suggest TSR. If indeed they are using a later version of Unreal Engine, TSR tends to be far superior to DLSS and at a comparable performance level.
FSR, you mean?
Oh. Yes, sorry. Far superior to FSR, yes. Does tend to be a lot better. I do hope they can get performance into a good spot. If it's GPU limited, drop resolution, upscale to 1440, provide some mode to offer higher performance. And if that's off the table, then just provide different options for frame rate capping. There are a million ways to configure this. Obviously, we've seen a recent case where a developer configured a game in 3 totally new ways. It looked like Wukong.
How novel. I was not expecting. Bespoke.
So, bespoke ways, totally new ways, really exciting stuff. But obviously on Xbox here, you get 120 hertz LFC VRR, so that can clean things up to a large degree if you have a compatible display. But yeah, it's nice to see Unreal Engine 5 looking pretty good here. I haven't looked through this in too much detail, but it looks like there could be some Lumen use in here. Possibly VSMs.
Yeah, I think it's software lumen based on
software lumen. It does look pretty good, and it's nice to see another example of a really good looking UE5 game out there, hopefully with decent performance, and certainly looking a lot better than the game did last year, because I remember hearing some stories about that, and it was really not in a state that really indicated that the game was close to ship. Obviously that wasn't the case. They delayed it a little bit, but I'm glad to hear that it's in decent shape now.
It was difficult for us last year, I think, Alex, because we really want a great Stalker game, but also we're acutely aware that effectively it's being developed in a war zone, which which is
so you feel for them immensely, and so this is one of those games where you want it to have a success story as much as possible due to the development stuff. It's like when I think it was around the time Metro Last Light came out, there was some great reporting about the conditions at 4A's office in the production of that game, and they just sounded wild. You just couldn't believe it. And here, I imagine the story is somewhat similar, that there's just a lot of production challenges out of the fact that, there's rolling blackouts and missile sirens going off, and basically anything that can disrupt real work and emotional things. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to covering it. I hope we get, like always, I want to build always a good deal ahead of time so that I can cover it in good in good pacing, because one of the things that happens if you don't get a game far ahead of time is that you're kind of rushing to hit embargo to make sure that people will watch what you're talking about, and that's that can actually impact, not I want to say the quality of the coverage, but the breadth of things it can cover. And I want to cover a lot of bases, and for games that I cherish.
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, the concept that a development team can spend 5 years on a game and then you're given 5 days to review that is just nuts.
It's nuts. I have no idea what the basis for that is.
I think it's, obviously is the kind of rush to the finish line, which means that they want you to see the final game. But there is value in just giving a build early to reviewers with notes. This is going to change. This patch will arrive at this date. And we've got some idea of how we can then, pace the coverage that we're going to do.
Right. You can get so much out of that, just even early with patches. You just need to prep the reviewer.
The other thing, of course, which we've done in the past, is that if we do get early review code and we see things that, maybe could be tuned or improved, we can feed that back to the development team straight away. And, that's happened actually several times, and it, makes for a better game, just a win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Stalker 2, looking forward to it. I think actually what you're talking about, Oliver, the inclusion of graphics modes could be a good thing. It's kind of ambitious what they're doing now without them.
Right.
But, choice is a good thing for users, I think.